Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I said good morning. Morning. Thank you. Yeah, kicking off a mass. Maybe it's more of a funeral service. Welcome back to the second session of the day. My name is Christopher Ludwig. I'm the editor of the Automotive Logistics Group, including finished vehicle logistics. As I hope you realize, this session is focusing on import and exports, and the other session in the other room, I believe, is looking at quality. So we've got a great panel here today, including some additions to what would have been on your program, and I will introduce you to the panel in just a moment. But this session, of course, looking at basically taking a bird's eye view of the import-export situation in North America right now, and everything related to Ro-Ro, to inland carriage, in and out, inbound, outbound. Gathering. I believe that this week in August is a well-known crab fest that a lot of people come down, so take an opportunity to come and do some crabbing and then come and talk about import and export. So I mean, we're gonna cover all kinds of topics here related to ports and to shipping and trucking in and out. So it's going to be a great event, just one day, I think, with a sort of cocktail reception at the end. So I invite all of you to join us in Baltimore, and that, of course, will be followed in the autumn by our event in Detroit. So we're really trying to see you all as much as possible. So moving on from that to our session today, obviously it's kind of a kickoff, if you like, to the kind of topics we'll be covering at that conference. I mean, I'm going to leave our panel to give you the details, but I suppose the big headline, if we want to take it, is obviously that we have strong growth and quite a bit of change across the network when it comes to import and export in North America right now. Ports are at strong capacity. We saw the figures earlier on the production growth. And as much as we're seeing localization in the US and Mexico, it's not necessarily cutting down the import volume that we're seeing. You saw Volkswagen, I think, plans to import another 100,000 more vehicles from Europe by 2020, as well as another 50 or 60,000 from Mexico. So just one of many examples. And we'll hear from our panel about some of the other growth, including on the export side, which has really gone strongly. Car makers like Toyota and Honda and other Japanese makers, as well as, of course, the Detroit 3, who are really seeing strong exports out of the US and North America. So a lot of stuff for us to sort of tackle, capacity issues, some stuff that we've definitely heard about before, but it'll be a great opportunity. Let me introduce our panel to you. We're going to have two presentations, and then we'll have a panelist to kind of lead us into some discussion. Very happy to have Brian Mason, National Manager, Strategic Planning and Communications at Toyota Logistics Services. We're also, after several years, we finally got her to the event. Rory Hepner, who's the General Manager of Vehicle Distribution and Logistics for Mercedes-Benz USA. Bill Kerrigan, Director at KGI Global Logistics Consulting, and of course also of the AIG, and a strong partner of ours now, of course. And also Marty Colbeck, Director of East Coast Sales for Auto Warehousing Company. So a great mix of OEMs, import and export issues, and some industry experts. So that's enough from my side. I would like to invite Brian now to give his presentation.
Thank you, Chris. So we have our cue. So TLS has been, and Toyota has been in the export business. We started in 1992, very low numbers, very small. And we've progressively grown over the years as our North American production has grown. Now we have 8 plants in North America, and we build about 73% of our vehicles that we consume in North America here in the US and in Canada. So we've had the opportunity to export quite a few vehicles. And take a look at couple of things that are going on right now in our operations. We now export to over 40 countries, and we have 11 export marine carriers, 13 ports of departure, and 7 vehicle processors. Now, I think this slide in itself shows that we've had a lot of growth and there's been a lot of expansion. However, the challenge is, if we look at our import side, we import 800 to 900,000 vehicles a year using only 5 ports and using only 5 marine carriers. So that kind of brings up the issue and some of the challenges with export, in that with smaller volumes, we tend to be chasing service, and that is looking for the export vessel service going to the destination that we want to go to. And so that's why we have a very high number of export carriers, very high number of ports of departure. That's probably one of the biggest challenges we have in export, is managing just that number of different departure points, the number of different carriers, the number of voyages. And I think it's especially a challenge as you're getting into the import and export business, in that it takes really as much effort and administration to send 15 Sienna vans to Honduras as it takes to send 30,000 Avalons or Sequoias to the Middle East. So it's something where, unfortunately, the administration for export is not really scalable, and it can be a real challenge for a company and a real challenge on systems, administration, and other things. So that's some of the things that we're dealing with at Toyota. Excuse me. We had over 800 export voyages in 2013. And again, we have 40 different current distributors that we send Toyota vehicles from North America to. Our volume for 2014 is estimated to be around 107,000. By 2015, it'll be 124,000. Our large markets are Middle East and Mexico, Puerto Rico, and Hawaii. We consider Puerto Rico and Hawaii exports in our company because they're actually separate distributors from Toyota Motor Sales USA. So we consider them as export, and we have to use marine to get to them. And Australia is one of our newer markets, and New Zealand is one of our newer markets as well. The countries that we're adding just this year are the areas, really regions. Central America, we've started export Corolla, around 2,100 vehicles. By 2015, that'll grow to about 3,600. South America, also Corolla, 5,600 in 2014 and 12,600 by 2015. And this is a good example of a small volume market. Libya with Avalon with only 120 vehicles and to be determined for 2015. And that's how an export market starts. That's how your export markets grow, is you have a few hundred vehicles the first year and a few hundred more the next year, and hopefully there's growth after that. But the challenge is there's almost as much administration to get those 120 vehicles to Libya as there is to get the 5,600 vehicles down to South America. So that's a challenge I think all OEMs face in the export business. And our export destinations, port of departure and port of entries. I just wanted to highlight we have 2 new ones this year that we're using that we have not used previously. We're using IAP at Brunswick, and we're using Pasha at Grays Harbor. And both of these have worked out very well. IAP was actually our service award winner in 2013 for outstanding service by a non-transportation partner. So they've done an excellent job, and we're sending to Australia out of Brunswick and looking at other destinations as well. And that's all I have. Thank you. I'll look forward to your questions.
Okay, thank you, Brian. I think that gives us a really good sense, obviously, of some of the developments that we're seeing particularly on the export side, and as Brian mentioned, the scalability issues in terms of almost the same effort as moving 15 cars as 30,000. So I look forward to coming back to some of those issues during the Q&A. But first, I'd also like to invite Rory up to the stage. Yeah.
Okay, I guess I'm standing. I was going to sit, but I'll try standing.
Is that okay with you?
Well, as Chris said, it's taken a long time to get me here, so I am thrilled to be here. I feel I'm among many, many experts, and I'll be honest, I don't know if I'm an expert. I had a different growing up thing with Mercedes-Benz. I've been with them for 23 years, and I've been in a lot of different things. The first one we won't talk about, because no one ever likes to talk about lawyers, but that's where I started. But I saw the light, and I got out, and I went on to the sales side, and then from sales operation into logistics. So I ask for your patience relative to the vast experience sitting in this room. But I will tell you in the last 3 years, I've thoroughly enjoyed being in the logistics operations at Mercedes-Benz USA. And while we don't deal with the volumes that Toyota does, we have a small company that has grown with our domestic, our volumes coming that are domestic, that were built in this country, as well as all the cars that we're bringing in, as well as we do have a little bit of an export business coming out of Vance, Alabama, our trucks. So let me just quickly kind of give you an overview of how as I said, we're set up. We're much smaller than Toyota. Am I moving the slides?
Yes, you can.
This one. This is the organization that I'm responsible for, and that's why it seems a little different from the information that I've shared with different individuals at some of these conferences that I have started to attend this year. I'm responsible for the systems as well as the ordering and allocation, so everything from an IT standpoint. What I also find interesting is I report to the Vice President of Sales. We have always had our distribution, allocation, our logistic operation for the cars report to the VP of Sales. Our parts distribution reports to the after sales. So it's a little different than what I've seen with other OEMs. I'm responsible for our wholesale plan. I like to say, when I was on the sales side, I was really good at coming up with programs to move the metal, and I could spend money like you couldn't believe. Now, I focus on making the money. So it's an unsung business, a wholesale, but that's truly how Mercedes-Benz or any manufacturer makes their money, is selling those cars to the dealers. And you guys helping us process them and moving them. That is really the bedrock of an OEM and how they make their money. I'm responsible for the imports and logistics. We do have the responsibility for all the franchises that Mercedes-Benz has in this country, which includes the Smart, the little one. We have the Smart, and we're hanging in there. We're doing about 10,000 a year, so we're very pleased with that, as well as the Sprinter, which is a separate franchise, as well as any of the Mercedes-Benz vehicles. And every once in a while we're bringing something that we think is great. Maybach, we had that for a while, and then those things just don't work out. But we try very hard, as well as strategic VPC and VPC operations. We have 3 VPCs throughout the country, but what's interesting is they're all managed by MUSA, and the work is done by MUSA employees, which is a little different than how a lot of the other OEMs do it. This just gives you a rough idea of where our regional offices are. 4 regional offices in Jacksonville, LA, as well as in Chicago, we're in the Midwest, and New Jersey near our corporate office. As well as we have 5 parts distribution centers. But as I said before, they don't report to us, to the VP of Sales. They report to the VP of After Sales, which is different. And we have 5 regional training centers throughout. So we have 3 VPCs, and a vehicle preparation center for us is done at 3 different ports. We've done numerous benchmark studies on how we're going to set up our operations from an import standpoint. And basically where we're at is we have our largest facilities in Baltimore. It's 78 acres. We have, I apologize, it's 94 acres. We have about 78 employees there, plus we have third parties that assist with us, which is a big project of ours, is accessorization of vehicles. It's a little niche that we started to develop, and it has grown substantially in our company, accessorization of the vehicles. We have such long lead times from when dealers can order vehicles and then add accessories. They don't think that quick. They want to put something on a car. They're not thinking about it 4 months before. They're thinking about it the closer the car is actually going to get to the dealer. So we've been able, with a little niche in that market, is we have a numerous number of accessories that we make available to our dealers that we install at the VPCs. It has grown substantially from last year. We probably wholesaled approximately over 300,000 vehicles. Of that, we probably put some type of accessory on 290,000 vehicles. So you can see it has grown substantially for the Mercedes-Benz. We started this about 2010, 2009, and we did probably close to 600,000 accessory items. That is a great revenue maker for Mercedes-Benz. And what we've learned is, one, our factories, and I can't speak for other factories, it takes a long time to take an accessory and be able to put it on a vehicle, just from a standardization standpoint with the factories. So we're kind of like the test environment. We can install the accessories. It's done in economies of scale because the vehicles, we're doing a bunch at one time. It's more efficient. Dealers find it much easier to sell it when it's done at the VPC, and then they can residualize it. So it's a win-win for everyone, and this gives our factories an opportunity to see these different accessories that are being installed and determine whether or not they might eventually standardize them and do them at the factory. And that's happened with a number of them. A few of them from MBUSA's side, we don't want them to install because that ends up allowing us to hit some of our objectives with Daimler regarding accessorization. As I said, we have Los Angeles, which is in Carson, and there'll be an announcement. Some might know in about 3 weeks there'll be an announcement. We are finally moving. We finally have a new facility that is about 50 acres, 1 million square feet building. It'll be the biggest garage parking structure that we've ever had, and it's all indoor. Would have been nice in Baltimore, especially after this past winter, but no, we have it in LA. And I'll leave it at that, and maybe you can figure out where we're going, but the press announcement from MBUSA will be coming out in the first week of June. It has come out from others, but not from us yet, so I'll just leave it at that, but we're very excited. This is something we've been working on since I've been at the company, 23 years. We've been trying to find a long-term solution for LA. We're very committed to this market. We're very committed to the Port of Long Beach, and this new location hits all those criteria. And we'll be moving a regional office into it, as well as our training center. So it's going to be the Mercedes-Benz West Coast campus. We're very excited because it's going to be the first time we're going to hopefully have a presence of Mercedes-Benz in Southern California, which is a very important market for us. Our third VPC is in Brunswick, Georgia, and that really is a VPC that we put in 2010. We moved from Jacksonville, and it's right on the Port of Brunswick. That's also where we do the exports for Vance. MBUSA is responsible for bringing the vehicles from Vance that get exported. Our exports are out of Brunswick, Savannah, and Jacksonville, basically, for Vance. And what has changed a lot with Vance is our marshaling yard, and a VPC does repairs, it does accessorization, it does any quality campaigns. A marshaling yard is attached to the plant. So we're attached to the MBUSI, and we're the logistic provider to move finished vehicles. And that's all we do. We also do that for Latson, which is our Sprinter facility in Latson, South Carolina. But we don't do any accessorization. It's basically we're just supposed to get the vehicles finished completely, everything is perfect, and then move them out. And that's where we get the exports from, is only from MBUSI. Our trucks come out of MBUSI. And how that was set up was originally that plant, when it was opened in 1995, was just to handle the US market. That was it, because no one ever thought that SUVs would take off in the rest of the world because they're big and et cetera. And they did. And what has happened over the last 5 years is our exports have exceeded what our domestic market is out of MBUSI. 60% of the vehicles that were being produced out of MBUSI were being exported. So that caused challenges for MBUSA. That was a whole new model for us, because we are there to provide, to get vehicles to our dealers within the United States. We had to learn new things, deal with different providers in order to do the exports on behalf of Daimler. And that's a synergy that Daimler does, is by using MBUSA in this country to move the finished vehicle logistics. They don't they don't hire a third-party company to do it. They have MBUSA do it and allow us then to hire the resources that we need in order to move the vehicles. I think that's it. That kind of gives you an overview of our environment is vastly different than Toyota. We're not as big as that in the United States, and we've just been growing in it. We're very fortunate. It was a good year in 2013 for MBUSA, being the #1 luxury brand in the United States. We'll see what happens this year. Tough competitors, but we have a lot of great new products that are coming that we're doing everything in our power to accessorize it, which will bring more revenue into the company. And that's something that is a big focus of ours and a challenge for us. And the ability for us to move our vehicles out to our dealers, working with our carriers, rail, truck, in an efficient manner. And those are the challenges that we're having from an import and export standpoint. Thank you.
Hey, fantastic. Thank you very much for that, Rory. Again, I think that really hits on some of the key themes that we're seeing as well in terms of obviously growth and export, some of the value-added services that can be done in a port. I mean, I think we'll come on to it in discussion, but there's interesting debates between an in-sourced model like Mercedes-Benz has, and of course, and Toyota in many cases, and outsourced models. And I'd be interested to hear some more ideas on that. Great to hear about the big investment in Southern California here by Mercedes. There might be a few straggling Toyota experts who might not want to make the move out to Texas, so maybe you want to keep some of those business cards when we see over the next couple of years. So, but I'm sure that 100% will go. I'm sure. Our next speaker, Bill Kerrigan, always fun, always controversial. So I'm hoping that you're going to live up to that for us now. Do you want to speak from the podium, or you want to talk from there?
I'll sit here if that's all right.
Please.
Good morning, everyone. I want to thank Louis and Finished Vehicle Logistics for allowing me to be here today. Obviously, I come as a representative of AIAG. If I had said to you 6 years ago today that there was a threat of a ILWU strike on the West Coast, which there was, that ports and processors, especially on the East Coast, were at or near capacity, that there were service disruptions in some of the other logistics providers, there was a driver shortage, we were facing increased production in Mexico, we were facing increased exports from both coasts, and that the ocean carriers were at capacity. That pretty much described where we were in May 2008. Pretty much describes where we are now in May 2014. And so, my question to all of you is, what did we learn? In my capacity at AIAG is we are offering to you, and it was mentioned by Volkswagen and by Mike Riggs this morning, a neutral and legal environment in which to discuss how we can address these logistics impediments, if you call them, and how we have opportunity to work with each other and find solutions going forward. That includes benchmarking. But more importantly, we feel there's a lot of young people in this business now that are coming up, and we want to do more and provide more of an education and training role. And we need your help to do that, because AIG is just a facilitator. We just provide the venue and hopefully some experts to help the process along. We were very successful doing EPOD this past year, and we'll talk about a little bit more about that tomorrow. But we need the OEMs especially, who are our members, to come in and provide the volunteers and the time to get these things done. On the outbound side, we've been very successful. We've had a lot of great cooperation from the Class 1 railroads, a lot of who are in this room today. Some of the ocean carriers who are getting involved, and a couple more have told me in the last 24 hours they're going to get involved. We're working with ATA and AECC, Bob Farrell, and Bill Schroeder at AHA, as far as getting the Holloway folks in the room too. And that's what's going to take for us to tackle these problems. I mean, when I look at exports, I live in just outside Charleston, South Carolina, and if anyone told me we were going to do 300,000 BMWs in 2015, I would have told them they were crazy. But that's what we're going to do, just out of Charleston next year. Now, you multiply that up and down the East Coast, the West Coast, and potentially, exports going out of the Gulf or imports, it's going to put a huge strain on our system. we got to find a way to work for it and, going forward. And that's what we're offering you today. So that's my little speech. I hope you don't mind too much, Chris. So.
My pleasure. Great. Thanks for that, Bill. I want to ask Marty to kick us off also with some of his observations and thoughts before we open up for Q&A.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here when I found out yesterday afternoon, Bill. It's extremely fortunate for auto warehousing that we're on a panel with both Toyota and Mercedes-Benz, in that Mercedes-Benz is our neighbor in Baltimore, and we unload rail cars on their facility and coordinate unloading of rail cars, Toyota product that is going out of the country at the Port of Baltimore. So it's extremely apropos that we be here to compliment them on the way that we conduct business and the way that we do the synergies of the process that goes on at the Port of Baltimore as it needs to happen at the other ports. There's going to be more emerging ports up and down the East Coast, and there's going to be smaller ports because, as Bill pointed out earlier, there's just no more room. You know and I know that you can get 5 containers, one on top of another, but you can only put one vehicle in a bay. So the opportunity for the ports has been to maximize the profitability through putting containers on there, and Automotive was kind of, yeah, we'll put some of those in there as well. Well, now if you take a look at it, Baltimore is very near capacity with, we got notified by one-time move of vehicles redirected from Mexico coming up to Baltimore. And after the 5th or 6th vessel that came up on that one-time move, we said, this is wonderful business and this is great. We love it. We'll take it and we're doing it. But again, the capacity of that port is limited by geography. You can't make any more land. We are committed to our customers to provide them a quality operation and to put throughput. As you pointed out, it's not only the volume of vehicles, it's also the amount of time that you put on those vehicles and the accessorization, which continues to increase. So if accessorization time is increasing and the volume continues to grow, something's got to give somewhere. So we need a methodology of communication to the haulaway carriers and to the railroads in order to make this process work smoothly. Working with AIAG about 6 years ago, they started on what they called the visibility of finished vehicles throughout the network. Earlier this morning, Jan talked about KPIs. What are industry KPIs? What do we use to measure? In order to use industry KPIs, you need standards set that are not variable standards that this railroad says it's constructive placement and this railroad says that it's when the cars are on the ground, that's when we start counting. It's got to be a understood and agreed to time frame where the KPI begins and ends, and that's how you provide measurement, true measurement, which is accurate measurement, which tells you how well the industry is doing. So the AIAG set out, and they had help from ICL, they had help from Toyota, they had help from CSX, they had help from the Norfolk Southern, they had help from numerous Chrysler, General Motors, people participating in a study that was done and a white paper that was published on the benefits of standardization of, what's the correct word? Standardization of terms and standardization of measurements. And it's through understanding those measures that we're going to, as a supply chain, better understand how good we are or how bad we are, where the problems are and where the opportunities to smooth out the process are. So fully 100% behind AIAG and working with the manufacturers. Like I say, we unload vehicles at the Mercedes property in Baltimore and their Toyotas that go on. We share first point of rest with Toyota, with Mercedes at the Fairfield terminal. So it's working together. Everybody has to have good communication, and I think that's what Jan was trying to bring up this morning. It's what Mr. Riggs brought up this morning as well. It's communication that just continues to flow, is accurate and understandable by everyone. So there's my 2 cents. You got what you got.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, and indeed, thank you to all of our panel there for their input, their presentations and comments. I want to open it up straight away to the floor. I also will remind you that we have the live streaming. If anyone is too shy to put up their hand, or if indeed anybody watching this from home wants to ask a question, I'll be checking. I'm actually not playing Candy Crush Saga when I'm looking on this. I'm actually checking to see if your question. Okay, I am a little bit, but I mean, I'll have plenty of questions if you don't start. But does anybody want to kick us off with a question to our panel? Well, I'll start it because Marty just brought up, I think, some really interesting or good points about standards and measuring standards and really drilling down and understanding processes. I was just in Stuttgart last week with Robert Bosch, excuse me for the kind of deviation here, but we were talking about their warehouses, and they've done lots of studies and pretty much figured out that they've got this very nice Toyota-inspired Bosch production system in their plants, which they do all kinds of lean measurements and timings and process innovations, all that kind of stuff. And in the warehouses, they haven't really done any of that. And pretty much further away you go from the plant, the less lean and the less kind of process innovation you see. So I want if maybe we could throw that question to the OEMs in terms of because you both have significant in-house operations for at your ports. So do you see, or are you, really measuring in a Toyota kind of way all of your standards and your processes, and in a very good German sort of way in the Mercedes sort of ports? So maybe you can just give us some thoughts on that, and we can start from there.
Sure. I think at Toyota, just in the last year, we've created actually a new national manager position, national manager of quality, and that is supply chain quality from end to end, and that is both for import and export vehicles. And we put a tremendous amount of effort into driving that quality all the way out to those export customers. And I think that's one of our biggest challenges is for every export country that we send vehicles to, there's a slightly different expectation of quality. And for anyone in the room with an OEM who's exported vehicles to any country, you know that there's a difference when you send vehicles to the Middle East versus Australia versus to Europe versus anywhere else in the world as compared to, say, USA domestic. And that's something at first it can be very alarming because you get a lot of complaints, you get a lot of issues, people are raising issues over something that to them is very important. And because they're the customer, it is important. You have to take it as that. And you have to adjust to that as kind of your new normal of if we're going to export vehicles to a new country, we have to absorb their culture. We have to absorb their requirements for that. And so that's something that we have to take all the way back into our supply chain and look for different solutions and look for different challenges that are presented. I mean, one of the big issues we have is we send vehicles so far in some cases. When we send vehicles to the Middle East, it's a 24-day sea voyage. And it goes all the way across the Atlantic, through the Mediterranean, through the Suez Canal, and all the way around the Gulf. And so a lot can happen to a vehicle in that time, especially if you go through different transshipments and transshipment ports. So it's quality is a huge issue for us, but I think we're putting a lot of resource after that right now.
Well, those Germans, it's always been one of our disciplines relative to when we're bringing the vehicles into the United States. Our whole process from measurement and inspecting the vehicles from the time they enter it, from the first point of rest until they go to our dealers, we measure. And we have KPIs. I wouldn't say it's standardization, and we applaud that, and we want to be a part of it, because we do think from the time when the vehicles actually leave our vehicle preparation centers until they get to the dealers, that's where it's kind of like the black box for us. And we've done some things which I think are okay for Mercedes-Benz in trying to make sure the quality, the timeliness of our vehicles as they're getting to the dealers is on some type of standardization, but I would tell you that it's just internal. And we share with our carriers some of the KPIs that we're looking at, but that's based upon what we have seen, not necessarily based upon how the industry looks at it, but what MBUSA is looking for. As for the exports coming out of Vance, we are just a logistic provider. We get them, mainly everything that goes to Brunswick will then go off to Bremerhaven, and then Daimler Logistics will take over. So we don't really get any feedback, as Brian had said, or have taken an active role in developing KPIs for the exports that are going over, because everything, basically, the big volume goes back to Bremerhaven, and then they take over, and they determine the KPIs that they're going to look at.
Bill, Marty, do you want to add anything further from that?
I think that every manufacturer has their own way of measuring, absolutely, and they're all correct for that manufacturer. But what we don't have are industry standards, again, is the whole thing. And I totally agree with you in what you're saying, but if we're able to look at the supply chain and find out exactly what is the cause that we don't have rail cars in a certain place at a certain time, why don't we have the right haulaway equipment in the right place at the right time, and we measure, we can all look at a measure that is done by an independent company that sits back and just takes that information, measures it, puts it out for us and says, okay, here's where we are this month, here's where we were last month, take a look at where this bubble is, and as an industry have good, fruitful discussion on what is the cause. If it's just weather, if it's a blip, then that's going to be a blip, and we can understand that, and we can look at it over a period of time. But if it's a consistent up and down, if it's a consistent irregularity based on the same standards all the time measured, then it's a really great thing, and that's where the AIAG comes in to collect data independently from any manufacturer. The other difficulty is that each manufacturer has their own systems. And their own systems are, God love them, some of them are antiquated to say the least. And they're very difficult to get around. So if I am a supplier to Toyota, I have to have a system that speaks directly to Toyota. If I'm a supplier to Mercedes, I have to have a system that speaks directly to Mercedes. And we do that, and that's not a problem. But imagine if we were able to have a universal language, one language that says that, here we go, I want to tell you everything, and I can tell it all to you in one way. I'm able to cut my costs, and guess what? If I'm able to cut my costs, I pass my savings on to you. So that's another thing to think about as far as the communication tools that are out there now and the way that we could potentially use those communication tools.
Thanks for that. Question from the floor. You're all quiet and shy, but you're not going to go to lunch earlier, I'm afraid. I'm in control here. So, I guess staying on that point on quality a little bit, again, particularly starting with Toyota and Mercedes, you have insourced, you have TLS run terminals, and then you also obviously use some provider places as well. It seems like particularly for the exports. And obviously some distributors and stuff. Can you talk a little bit about the quality measurements that you're seeing between the difference in your in-house operations versus some of your providers, and where that, where you'd like to see that go?
I think with our providers, we've got very good relationships with them. I think there's a huge difference between hiring a provider and partnering with a provider. And everyone that we work with, whether they be a logistics provider, whether they be a trucking company, rail company, an ocean freight company, we look at them as partners, and we have long-term relationships with these folks. And we want to build that relationship over the years so that they have an understanding of our culture and they understand our message about quality. And TMC in Japan has universal standards of quality that we adhere to. And when we partner with a logistics provider at a port facility or at one of our marshaling yards to do processing, we're always looking to share that TMC quality standard with that new partner and work with them to help adhere to that. And sometimes it's a little bit of a challenge because it is a different culture. We do look at things differently than maybe other companies do. But we have a pretty good yardstick with Japan production. Ever since we started North American production years ago, everything was always compared to, is it as good as the vehicle made in Japan? Mm-hmm. And we can truly say the vehicles in North America are as good as the vehicles made in Japan, and that's not an accident. We go after that pretty hard. But I think We do have a lot of KPIs. We do routine audits at all of our facilities. If we find challenges with quality, if we find challenges with any of our providers, that's an indication that we need to talk and sit down and explore the problem and study it and kind of peel back the onion and find out what's going on inside so we can fix that. But it's something where a problem isn't the end of the relationship. A problem is really where the relationship really starts. And that's where you start building the relationship, is when you solve that problem together. So I think that's what we try to do with all of our providers, and a lot of them are out here in the room. So.
Well, as I said in my opening remarks, we at all of our vehicle preparation centers, they are MBUSA employees that actually do the processing and accessorization and any of the campaigns on the vehicles. And that's been our business model since we came to this country. And there are very good providers, but that is just something that we've looked at from a business standpoint that works for us. We believe it gives us the flexibility. We believe it gives us more control over how we're going to process our cars and maintain it. And so we have very, just as Toyota, we do have our standards that are given to us by Daimler on how we're going to process our cars and verifying that things are done properly. But what we're able to do at MBUSA, which is new for us, is really trying to work harder on our relationship and developing standards, or I should say KPIs, because standards, I'll say, is for the industry, with our carriers. We've implemented a few things over the last few years to try to get back to having a good relationship, because we'll be honest, I mean, when those black years came with the recession, our OEM, we're very big on trying to cut as many costs as possible. Well, obviously that's going to impact, not in a positive way, your relationships with your long-term carriers. And so what we've been focused on over the last few years is getting back, restoring our relationship in a much more positive way where it is a partnership. Because really that's how you're going to find efficiencies, and that's how you're going to find the quality to become better, is when you're working as partners, not when you're in a situation where it's a customer and you're dictating how they're going to run their business. And with that, we've developed a few new things that are really just developed more so from a KPI standpoint. We are doing more, I hate to call them audits, but compliance looking. I'm trying to standardize how our carriers, our truckers in the United States will be carrying our product, which is different. It's done in Daimler, but we're trying to do it in a more collaborative way with our carriers in the United States. And also from that, we've learned, we're having more meetings with our carriers that help us develop new ways, from a quality standpoint, of the loads. We work very hard now on developing loads based upon where our truckers have trucks coming into, versus just processing vehicles and having them sit. What good does that do us if we just process them and let them sit if the truckers can't come pick them up? So that, it seems pretty simple, but we never did that. So shame on us for not doing it, but it is, that is helping from a quality standpoint, because we're not as rushed as we used to be with a lot of our cars.
Thank you. You want to add something, Bill, please?
I just want one comment we were talking about before, and coming from an ocean background, I have my preference of carriers, obviously, but one thing, Brian, you were talking about, and I've heard from a lot of OEMs, and again, this is just a comment, that we're doing so much more exporting to new markets, and it's difficult, as you said. It takes as much paperwork to ship one car to Quito, Ecuador, as it does to take it, anywhere else. But there's an opportunity there, I think. There's a lot of experience and expertise in this room, and a number of the OEMs are usually shipping to the same places. If there was a little bit more cooperation sometimes on that, I mean, you're going to work out your own volumes, your own pricing and stuff like that. But, that's a simple solution, I think, that could work for a lot of people. And I don't see it being taken advantage of in any high regard, even for the last, 35 years I've been in this business. So, just a comment. So,
it's an interesting point, perhaps, to, and I'm sorry to do this to you, Rory, but to ask you a little bit about, because obviously you did do that with BMW, working together in both the port and the transport, I believe. But I believe some of that has been undone, or I mean, maybe talk a bit about that experience, because maybe it sounded great, but maybe it didn't work out as well as it did on paper.
We did. We had it as well as processing. We processed BMW vehicles in our facility in Baltimore, and we also had a contract to move both Mercedes-Benz and BMW together. It was a joint contract. And while on paper, it seemed like a really good idea, and it was. Don't get me wrong, it really was. But what happens is we are competitors, and as we're in right now, both of us are in a growth mode. So it makes it very challenging, because as a logistic provider, we have a responsibility to make sure we provide as we're required to, and also to meet our customers' expectation. And that caused a lot of challenges for us as both of the franchises were growing, to be able to meet the demands for BMW and processing, as well as meet the demands for Mercedes-Benz. And we made a determination that, you know, it would be better for us going forward that, you know, and it was a joint decision that BMW would go elsewhere to process their cars, and we would just focus on Mercedes-Benz. So while I say it's great on paper, I will tell you sometimes when you're competitors, fierce competitors, and you're both in an expansion mode, there are challenges that sometimes make it very difficult to be master to everyone. And I think that's what happened to us. Our growth just kind of caused too many challenges for both OEMs. And from the transport standpoint, the same thing, just because it was challenges from that standpoint. But it was a good pilot to try.
Brian, I think you want to add something?
Yeah, one of the things we have done at Toyota, we currently do not process any other vehicles for another OEM. But one of the things we do is with our carriers, where we have locations that are in common with other OEMs, we do give our carriers the option on truck to co-load vehicles. And this has been especially helpful up in the Pacific Northwest, where we have, and in the kind of the Denver region, central part of the area, where you may have a small dealer up in Montana or North Dakota or northern Idaho, and we may only have 4 cars to send him this week. Well, he doesn't want to wait for 2 weeks till we have a full truck. So if we can co-load with another OEM and get those vehicles to the dealer faster, we're happy to let the trucking groups do that. So we do give them that flexibility. Unfortunately, rail's a little bit more of a challenge, because we usually buy by the rail car and purchase by the rail car. But that is a flexibility that we do give, and you know, it's an interesting idea that, you know, to potentially open that up even further. But it's something I think, especially at our port facilities right now, we're a bit under capacity at our port facilities on inbound, and so there may be some opportunities there. So.
Great. Did you want to add anything to that, Marty? Or?
Well, it's just interesting that a while back, I believe a couple of years back, the Union Pacific and one of their partners, I believe the Norfolk Southern, they got together and they tried co-loading of rail cars, which turned out to give them some time savings. But again, it did force the industry to go into per vehicle pricing versus per rail car pricing. And it created some obstacles and it created some difficulty. But I believe they found efficiencies in transit savings, time savings. And especially in the rail industry, where because of the way that the fleet is managed by the railroads and having a common fleet, it becomes more advantageous, I believe, for multiple manufacturers to go on to rail cars to like destinations out of like origins. In the Midwest, specifically the Detroit 3, the General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler being in such close proximity to each other, it's easier for them to do it. But once they get out to the West Coast, which is heavily, I mean, the heaviest rail distribution, it would probably be just as advantageous to set up, I don't know, to set up a common area where multiple manufacturers could come in and reload those rail cars coming back to the west, to the east. I don't know if there's an advantage to it or not, but I would be interested in seeing the results of the study that I believe the Union Pacific, Norfolk Southern did. CSX tried to do it for a while, so it would be really interesting. I believe the BNSF is involved in it as well somewhere, but it would just be interesting to see if we're looking at the supply chain in a fleet that's managed by the railroad, where everybody has to have that kind of access. Would this free up some of those rail cars that sometimes they find difficulty finding? I don't know.
Well, I think one of the other barriers that at least we as an OEM have goes back to systems. Our legacy systems are built around per rail car.
I understand.
We pay per rail car. Our entire vehicle system is tracking by rail car, and we assign VINs to a rail car. And it's, back in my old days when I was in IT for almost 15 years with Toyota, we had about 5 million lines of legacy code built into the vehicle system.
Right.
So that's a fairly formidable system to go after in terms of shifting it from a per rail car to a per VIN basis.
Totally understand. I believe the
so
railroads.
That's kind of an investment barrier for the OEMs that I think we would have to be able to sell the ROI on that long term to get the $1 million or $2 or $3 or $4 million plus that it would cost to make that change.
You're absolutely correct. And if it proves to be cost prohibitive, you're right, it doesn't make sense. But somebody has to do that analysis and really take a hard look. Because everybody, the legacy systems that are out there, every year that we don't do anything, we get further into it, you know what I mean? And we delay it, and that just means it's going to be another, instead of 1 year, you multiply it by 3 or 4, and it gets further out. And in the way that technology is advancing today, I mean, goodness gracious, we can track from the AWC system if a manufacturer wants to know 3 deviations in the same area on a vehicle, we can notify them on their cell phone and tell them, in the past hour, there have been 3 dings on the left fender of this vehicle coming off the end of the assembly line. You may want to go in the plant and look at it. So if that capability exists, and we have to take a look at the legacy systems, and trust me, it's not just Toyota. I mean, everybody, every manufacturer's systems, somehow we got to fight that fight and pull them into the 21st century.
And I would say it's very challenging for OEMs. I mean,
correct.
from a logistics standpoint, logistics is not the pretty stuff. It's not what sells the vehicles. And it's a constant fight at any, I don't know for Toyota, I know at Mercedes-Benz, it's a constant fight. Anytime trying to make any type of investment in a system, in property, in trucks, anything, is there's no, they don't look at that as a return.
That's correct.
It's just a cost. So it's a big challenge to get all that to say, okay, OEMs are going to all use the same system in order to do that. It's going to take a huge push or a huge crisis to say it's time to really reevaluate it, to get rid of these legacy systems.
Totally agree.
Well, when you start handling single exception moves, which is what you're going to end up having to do in the next couple of years because we don't have the capacity to handle it, you're going to be spending more money doing that than you would have been investing in a new system to handle it in the first place. That's, my opinion.
And it's a great example for an independent third party to establish themselves as a repository of the information to decipher it and then throw it to the individual manufacturers. One third party that takes all of the information in from all of the railroads, all of the haulaway carriers, all of the processors, everyone, they establish KPIs and then they distribute that information unbiasedly to all of the manufacturers.
Doesn't TTX do that?
I don't know.
No comment.
I don't know.
Aren't they supposed to do that?
I don't know.
I'd also like to agree with Rory that logistics is not the pretty stuff. I mean, especially when you just take a look around this conference, it's not such a pretty sight, is it?
No, I didn't mean it that way. I didn't mean it.
But actually, going on to that, I want to ask a question which is one of Louis' favorites, really. And I think he and Bill were actually even talking about it a little bit yesterday. And that's the degree to which logistics is a competitive advantage for your operations, and particularly looking here at terminal and port operations. I would sort of focus in there. For Toyota, for Mercedes, is this seen as a competitive advantage, or is it just another leg in the chain that's got to be swiped through as quick as possible? Do you see it? I mean, obviously with all the accessorization, there's opportunities for value. I don't want to answer the question for you, but start with Brian.
I think it definitely gives us competitive advantage. I think when we look at our VDC operations and the ability to put on PPO accessories, one of the things we're looking at PPO is it's kind of a path to inline accessories. If we're not sure, if we don't have the penetration if a certain accessory is only 10% penetration on a vehicle, that's not enough to impress the plant enough to alter their internal assembly line to install that part on only 10% or less of the vehicles. However, we can do that. We have that kind of flexibility in our marshaling yards and at our VDCs. And if we can get that PPO, that PPO accessory out there and get it popular enough that the dealers see it and the dealers start selling it, and all of a sudden that penetration goes up to 15 or 20 or 25%, then the plant gets interested, and that's when we migrate that PPO accessory into the plant and do it as an inline accessory. So, it's part of a really good PPO strategy is knowing when to take that PPO and make it an inline accessory, get it out of the VDC shops, get it out of the marshaling yards, and get it inline. But it's working with the factory and working with the manufacturing folks to see what's their kind of criteria for acceptable levels of that. So I think that's something that we really push at Toyota, and we've been able to get a lot of Bluetooth started that way. Bluetooth was kind of an unknown, and it just took off, and all of a sudden nobody will buy a car without Bluetooth, and so now they'll do it in line. But the first couple of years it was PPO, and so it gives us flexibility.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. I mean, it's the test center, your VPCs and marshaling yards for the installation of accessories. And also just the market and the technology, as I said before, is changing so much. We're much quicker, much more nimble to do it. But when I think I took your question a little differently. Do I look at logistics as being a competitive edge? I think from a sales standpoint, and that's my background, I do think it is a competitive edge. If we can, with Mercedes-Benz, we have a long lead time from the time the cars, by the time we order the cars and by the time they're actually available to go to the dealers. If I can cut that down at all, that does give us a competitive advantage against the other luxury manufacturers that we're competing against to get our cars out. And how we have our system set up, we're very focused on getting the sold cars. We build a lot for stock. We don't build a lot to order. That's just how the market works for us. So the ability for us with our priority system and the ability to get the vehicles as quickly as possible from the time they get to this country out to our dealers does give us a competitive edge against our competitors. I mean, we measure that KPI, all those KPIs from the time the cars come in. I mean, we're very, very fortunate if we're able to do it within one day. That's impressive to us, and that's where we get a competitive edge against the other competitors.
Okay. Bill, do you want to share some thoughts on that?
Well, again, Louis and I were having this discussion, as we always do, it seems, every year. And I think it's very individual to each OEM whether logistics is a competitive advantage or not. I would argue that the larger the volume, the less competitive it becomes, which means there's probably more reason to collaborate or cooperate. I hate collaborate because it sounds like you're writing a novel, but cooperate and find out where there are synergies. And we're doing a little of that through our OEMO committee at AIAG. We'd like to see a lot more done. I think at least the ocean carriers in the room, I know, would like to see a lot more cooperation done instead of having to call 42 different ports in North America, which is what they're doing now. So, I think there's a lot of room for improvement on both sides, because I also think it's a responsibility for the carriers to be able to point these things out to the various OEMs that they're handling.
Want to add that, Marty? Good. Anybody awake out there? Yes, in the back. Thank you. Just name and company, please.
Hello, everybody, and thank you, Marty and Bill and everybody for bringing up the idea that you should have a central data warehousing system, which ICL has been working on for years. We actually watch over about a third of the business right now in the United States for new cars, and about 22% in Canada. And we can look at what your exports are, Brian, for Toyota, and maybe even Mercedes. I'm not as quite sure if we have your exports in there, but as well as all of our other customers, and help you in that way if you want to say where you're going out of and that sort of thing when your exports are scheduled and things like that. We're moving more into that for Toyota in the near future anyways. So we'd be delighted to actually show where the data, where the numbers are, where you're going out, and compare them much like in a benchmarking study, what we can look at for export. You can do the same thing for the U.S. as a whole too. But anyways, it's good for you to bring that up. So if you need anything, we'd be glad to listen to you.
Thanks, Pat.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments from the floor? Okay. One of the things that I often hear is an issue when I talk to particularly haul-away companies, but also terminal process, is the sort of scheduling and the releasing, and the sort of, you know, a rig might have to wait outside for a couple of days before they know when they're getting the load. I'm not sure if that's an issue that has been better addressed now, or if it's just one of those things that is one of those repeat problems from the last 20 years, and we'll have it for the next 20 years. But has Toyota made any advances or innovations on this side?
I don't think we've had that problem for a while.
Okay.
We're actively, John Daly and our National Highway Transportation Group is actively always looking for a truck, especially recently, because we've been doing quite a few deviations due to capacity shortages. So, but I think right now all of our electronic tenders go out electronically to our to all of our truck carriers, so they know what's coming and they actually see it in advance, and we're doing everything we can to try to use that truck asset as efficiently as we can, because we want that truck to be able to deliver those vehicles and get back and take more vehicles, because our challenge right now is not enough truck, not enough rail car.
Similar for you, Rory? Or?
Well, I had mentioned that before, that we have started to do that in the last couple of years, and it is making a big difference for us. But we have to get better at it as we go on, but we are doing it.
Okay.
How far into the order process does your system go? In other words, on import vehicles, when a vehicle is coming into the country and it's on a vessel, do you know where that vehicle is going to go, or do you know what accessories are going to go on that vehicle, and when do you broadcast that to your third-party people? Do you have a feel?
Answer is it depends.
Okay.
But we have the capability of allocating vehicles to a dealer as soon as those vehicles are invoiced to us, and that happens at vessel departure from Japan for import vehicles.
Okay.
And the regional offices have the ability to allocate that vehicle anytime after that. Typically, the vehicles don't get allocated until close to arrival time of the vessel or at arrival. The only thing that's really an exception to that right now, almost 100% of the vehicles are coming off the vessel assigned. The exception we have is Scion has a little different business model. We place vehicles on what we call Scion hold, and we'll hold them. They're assigned to a dealer, but we hold them at the port facility for up to 90 days because the vehicles come in for the most part without radios, without wheel covers, without certain things, because the youth customer for the Scion wants to accessorize his or her vehicle.
Right.
So we do that within a 24-hour period in most cases, and then get the vehicle out to them. So it's a pretty quick turnaround. Yeah, we have all the parts and everything. So we've got a pretty good parts supply system to support that. For North American production, just about every vehicle is allocated at build time. Okay. And the dealers actually see it ahead of time. Most of them are allocated prior to build because the dealers can actually change accessories on those vehicles prior to build time. Okay. So we know where it goes. We do also give our dealers the option of they trade vehicles quite a bit. They can do that electronically. And so a vehicle may trade 1 or 2 or 3 times before it actually is built and hits the yard and then has to hit the out gate. But we track all that electronically, and so we know that. And you know, we work pretty hard, I think, with both our rail and our truck groups to give very accurate forecasts of volumes to all of our carriers. And we do that on a long-term basis, and then we do it even more accurately on a short-term basis.
Excellent.
It's the same for Mercedes, but our cars are, it's similar to the cars coming from Germany. Our cars are basically allocated, and dealers can, from the time they schedule the car, add accessories up until when it gets to the VPC. And that's where we see most of our accessory occurring, is when the cars get to the VPC. Okay. And it's all electronically done.
Looking out a couple of years, I mean, we saw the numbers this morning for what the projected production is, and each of your companies have your business plans and targets and objectives. We know that there's definitely been capacity issues with road and rail. How do you see over, let's say, the rest of the decade, the port capacity situation in the U.S.? Where do you think you're in a crunch? I mean, or if Rory does the new site in LA, is this going to relieve a lot of capacity, for example? I mean, the market regulating it in itself, and just want to get some of your views looking out a couple of years.
Well, we've been under capacity in LA for years. So this is going to allow us, I mean, we're still going to have this shuttle, which we don't have at the other two VPCs. We still have to shuttle from the Port of Long Beach to this facility, which is basically the same distance as where we currently go. But that'll remove one move, because we also have satellite lots.
Right.
So from that standpoint, we do think, this facility, the way all three VPCs, based on our growth that we have to 2020, will be sufficient to handle the growth that we have.
Okay.
The way we have it set up. That was the goal when we set up our strategic plan for our VPCs and our marshalling yards.
For Toyota, do you see?
For Toyota, we've been really seeing a lot of capacity uplifts at all of our plants. Virtually all of our plants in North America are at 100% plus production. And we're looking to increase that even more through shift changes and things like that. And taking advantage of maybe even 6-day production in some cases. So our capacity is definitely going up. I think the other reality is, and I think Mike Riggs hit it this morning in the session, and he talked about the new normal. What if what we have today is the new normal? And I think one of the things we're kind of getting our arms around at Toyota is that we need to move our product. We need to move our vehicles. Our dealers are screaming for vehicles. They need the product. We've got the product, to provide to them. It's just a means of getting it there. And it's something where more and more, I think Toyota is really looking at shifting, not as an interim solution, but as a long-term strategy, shifting more vehicle to truck and looking at truck as a primary resource. And it's something where we have to move the vehicles. We cannot continue to store vehicles. We can't park 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 vehicles at a marshalling yard. We just can't do it. Not when those vehicles are needed at dealerships. So I think we're kind of taking a step back and reassessing what our supply chain looks like. I'm going to talk a little bit about that tomorrow in the sweating the assets session. But I think it is one of the things where it is a competitive advantage for our company, but it's only a competitive advantage if we can get them the vehicles. Yeah. If we can get the trucks and the rail cars and the capacity that we need to do that.
Marty, they're looking out. What do you see? I mean, you raised the point right in the beginning, Marty, about Roro. Nobody wants that in a port. Well, you can't stack cars, so space is a premium. And you see
there are some ports that are anxiously reaching out and saying, hey, you know what? This automotive business is not a bad business to be in, and they're trying to make that change from the intermodal into automotive because they see the need there. They see the opportunity. Baltimore is the largest import area, import and export port, I believe, in the U.S. It's just at capacity now. I mean, almost at capacity. There's still some room to move it in and out. But again, that supply chain has to be efficient, and those vehicles, once they come in, they've got to go out. And once they come in, they've got to go out both ways, as both the import and the export. The Mexican influence now, as was brought up this morning with the volumes that are coming in, you've got the normal imports coming in from Europe and from Asia. Now you've got the complexity of what ports are they going to call from Mexico, and when are they going to call them, and how big is that volume going to be? And not only are the U.S. ports hit, but what about Veracruz? There's a limit to what Veracruz can handle. There's a limit to what Altamira can handle. And how long before we hit that volume? They've got to go in and out there too. So that's the interesting part. What are they going to do down in Mexico? Where are they going to go out of? And how much more volume can they handle there?
Yeah. Yep.
And again, as we discussed yesterday, there's a consequence to all this. The consequence of an increased volume is going to be cost. And I don't care what anybody says, it's going to cost you more. It's either going to cost you more to move the car, or you're going to bear the cost of an inventory carrying cost, which I don't know if that goes to logistics or not, but it goes to the company in some fashion. So if it's 20, 25 bucks a day per car, who's paying for that? Besides the fact that you got your dealer screaming at you and your zone manager screaming at everybody else. So there's going to be a cost associated with this, and whether it's going to be the ports. I've already heard from some of the ports today that, guess what? You leave your cars at my port, your storage rates are going to go up.
Absolutely.
Okay? So that's going to be the consequence going forward.
Yep.
In a time when we want to try to take costs out of the logistics chain.
Right.
Bill drew some parallels to 2008, and I hope that the issue doesn't get solved the way that it did that year, right?
Exactly.
When the market drops in half. We're kind of coming to the end here. I don't know if anybody has a final point or question that they'd like to ask our panel. We're in the middle here. Mike, it's on your way. If you could just say your name and company.
Hi, my name is Felix from the Panama Canal. In regards exports, I saw it was quite interesting when Audi said that they will do the sole sourcing of the Q5 out of North America. Does any of the OEMs see doing some type of sole sourcing, or just producing one car in one location and then exporting for the rest of the world?
Currently, we actually have vehicles that are sole sourced in the U.S. Both Sequoia and Avalon are only built in the U.S. They're not built anywhere else in the world, and we export those to Middle East and a number of other countries. So we already have a number of vehicles here that are sole sourced in USA. Tundra trucks are only built in the USA. But we do actively export all of those vehicles.
Mercedes going almost, I'm sure you have examples of it, but maybe going a little bit the other way with C-Class coming to the U.S.
Well, I think I had said earlier that the ML and GL, that our trucks are done out of Vance, and that they're not produced anywhere else in the world for exports. The domestic, what we've done now is, well, it's going back to almost like the original purpose of the plant in Alabama. We're only building for the U.S., for the NAFTA. The C-Class will be built out of Vance, Alabama. As of right now, we're not planning on having additional plants build domestic the C-Class anywhere else in the world. I would tell you our demand is exceeding what that plant can handle, so there'll have to be other discussions relative to that.
Okay, great, thank you. Unless anyone has a final point, I think we can go for lunch, but before I let you go, I would like you to thank the panel, because it was a great discussion. Just a couple of reminders, we're still in split streams in the next session. We're going to be talking about IT in this room. At the end of the day, we're going to tackle Mexico with some of the questions that Marty raised, so join us then. Lunch is upstairs on the lobby level, I believe, so there'll be signs, but enjoy lunch, and we'll see you soon.